This Choircast podcast is brought to you by Pelakiankwe, Processing Liberation Through an Indigenous American Lens. Hi, I'm Ryan, and my new book, Pelakiankwe, Processing Liberation Through an Indigenous American Lens, is a road trip story like no other. Through conversations with Native voices, I explore what liberation looks like from an Indigenous perspective, through history, theology, and lived experience. It's real, and it's an invitation to listen, question, and journey toward something deeper. Available April 8th from Choir Publishing.
Western Christianity has spent the last 2,000 years telling everyone they're separated from God.
This is Not Church with John and Nat Turney and Bethany Shea.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. My name is Nat Turney. I am one of three hosts. That's right. You get three. In most podcasts, you're lucky to get one. Sometimes you get two. But we go the extra mile here, and we give you three. So I'm also here with my brother John. Say hi, John.
Hi, John.
And also the lovely, the loquacious, I came up with a new one, Bethany.
I know. Did you pull up the thesaurus or something and try to figure it out?
It just fires. I was trying to be alliterative and see if I could think of a third L. Loquacious and
I don't know.
As I read your Facebook post, the one that seems to come out lately is liberal.
There you go.
You're so woke. That's become a pejorative. I don't understand it, but
I don't either.
Anyway, Bethany, say hi to everybody, Bethany.
Hey, everybody. Glad to be here with you.
And we're glad you're back with us.
Mm-hmm.
Last time we did an interview, I missed last week, and then you missed one before that. And so it's good to have the gang all back together. But this is the podcast that we lovingly have called This Is Not Church, because if it was church, you would have left by now. And again, we like to point out that Bethany would stay with you and offer you cookies and try to convince you to stick around. John and I are like, F this, we're out of here. So, but this is the podcast where we talk about all things either directly or tangentially related to faith and God and the divine, whatever. I don't even know how to put it anymore. I'm not sure where I stand on any of it, but we talk about it anyway because that's what we do. So we have, as always, an amazing guest. And so I'll introduce her to you, and then we'll get past my usual introductory blathering and on to the good stuff. So we're here today with Mary Terhune. She is RN. She's been involved in the healing arts for over 40 years, journeying from allopathy to homeopathy, body-centered massage, Reiki, and energy medicine. She studied at the Renaissance Institute of Classical Homeopathy and has a degree in sociology from Boston College. After practicing in Western medicine in different settings, she discovered natural medicine out of the need to heal herself. Her new book is titled Out of the Blue, and we're just excited to get to talk to you. Welcome, Mary.
And thank you. Thank you for having me, all of you.
Oh, we're glad.
I get all of you.
You didn't know what you were jumping into, right? Into the podcast melee, as it were. Well, we're glad you're here, and thanks for joining us. So if you wouldn't mind, we'd just like to get started sometimes talking to people about maybe a little bit about their background, their faith journey, all that good stuff, kind of give us an idea where you're coming from.
Well, my whole journey into spirituality, I guess if you want to call it that, began during a life crisis in 1984. And I had lost everything. I had lost all my retirement funds. I made a bad real estate deal, and I had a child to raise. I was divorced by then. And I was in dire straits, really. And it was one of those life crises that people talk about, where you just hit rock bottom and below rock bottom. And this one day, I just was so anxious, so fearful about my future. I was thrown into debt. I had lost everything. And I cried out to a God I didn't believe in. And I said, please, God, just let me die. And in that moment of just complete, I guess, surrender, all of a sudden and my mind could no longer think any bad thoughts because I kept blaming myself. It's like my mind just stopped and I just could not think one more bad thought. And just in that moment, in between those thoughts, this light just entered through my living room window. I was standing up in my living room and light entered through the window and began speaking to me. Now, that may sound odd in saying this, but when it happens to you, it feels familiar. And I had long ago left the Catholic Church because I didn't believe in the dogma, and especially the way it treated women. But I hadn't left my thoughts about Jesus, who I thought was more or less a living master, not belonging to any religion. And this light began to speak to me. Not only did it begin to speak to me, but it began to awaken this energy in my body, which I came to understand was the Kundalini energy, this light energy that runs in our body, which is our divine energy housed in this physical body, as in the kingdom is within, the kingdom of consciousness is within. And it awakened it so powerfully that I had to lay down. And my immediate feeling was this overall bliss that came over me in the midst of this despair. And the first thing that he said to me was, now do you understand that true forgiveness is self-forgiveness? And he gave me the experience of forgiving myself for everything I had to go through in my life up to this point. And he went on to speak other revelations. He went on to speak about judgment and the Bible, weight issues. And you wonder, why weight issues? Because I was a nurse. So I was working in a hospital at the time. And disease, aging, and then the ego. And as he would speak about these different topics, he would give me an inner experience of those topics. So I really understood them. I imbibed them and got to know them. And he awakened, I was working at a hospital in research administration in Boston, but I was also in my third year of massage school, graduating from that. And I had heard about, someone mentioned there was light in your body, and I'm like, what is that all about? Well, he gave me an experience of it, because then he awakened all the chakras in my body and the wheels that begin to spin, all going up my spine. And I went, oh my God, this is real. This is true. So I got to experience that. And I can say the bliss was phenomenal. I felt so much bliss just pouring out of me and in me. And the peace that I experienced was just unbelievable. And, when it happens to you, it feels not odd. It feels like something familiar, something you had forgotten about yourself that lives in you and lives in everyone. And at the end of everything that he had to say, he then withdrew his energy. Oh, before he withdrew his energy, he cleared something right here, and that was known as the third eye, right here. And he removed a veil that was there. I can only call it a veil. Removed it, because and then he left. And then when I went outside, I went outside to get some fresh air. I went to the back porch and I opened the door. And what I saw was phenomenal. I saw these packets of light surrounding everything. And these packets of light were filled with omniscience. They were filled with so much bliss and so much love. And I cried out, oh my God, this is paradise. But we've made it into something else, made the earth into something else. And I started sobbing, because I saw, out of our ignorance, we forgot who we were as divine beings. And we forgot that this universe, or this world, this planet on earth, is a paradise for us. We were given everything. We were given the stars and the sun and the moon and the trees and the birds and animals and earth and flowers and everything, and food and everything. And what have we done with it? We've basically created a mess for everybody, and so much suffering and so much pain. And at then I went back inside and lay down on the couch again, because I was just so overwhelmed with everything. And there was so much light pouring out of me, so much love for everything. It's like I only saw love, ate love, breathed love, to the point where I really didn't need much food. It was like this Amrita got released from up here, and I was just breathing in and breathing out this love. And I had to go to work the next day. I didn't want to go to work the next day, because I was just emanating so much love and swimming in it like a pool of love, that all I wanted to do was, like Eckhart Tolle, sit on the park bench and just watch the phantasmagoria, kind of the world just kind of floating by and in its movement. And that's all I wanted to do, and just revel in it, just revel in the amazement of watching this whole play out on Earth. But I had to go to work, and when I went to work, it was very difficult for me to function because I was in research administration. I was working with numbers. I had to work with numbers and percentages and, for funding and everything. And I couldn't do it. I just sat there oozing just in love, so much bliss that the numbers didn't make sense. The work didn't make sense. Nothing made sense but love. And eventually I was let go from my job because I could not function. And it was such a it's transformational time for me. And I knew that I wanted to meet a living master. I knew I wanted to meet a living master, someone who in the flesh could talk to me and tell me what happened to me, why it happened, and understand it even more. Because at that time, I didn't even know what a spiritual path was. I didn't know about, any of this. And so I wanted to meet a living master, and it was, I kept trying to find different teachers, but none of them, I didn't connect with any of them. I was looking for a pair of eyes that were deep and endless, and I was just looking for that connection that I felt with Jesus. And so it was about 2 years later in my search, and I wanted to meet someone who understood Einstein's theory of relativity, energy equals mass times light, because I equated somehow this light in me to that formula. So I happened to see that there was an advertisement for a talk on energy medicine at a local healing place, and so I went to it, and there were about 7 people on the board speaking, and each of them got up. They introduced their name, they said their name and what they did, but the last person stood up, and the first thing he said was E equals mc squared, Einstein's theory of relativity. And then he went on to explain it, how this light is housed in us, and I thought, that's the person I have to see. So I made an appointment with him, and I went to his office. It was like about a week later. And when I walked into his office, he excused himself. He said, I just have to get something. I said, fine. So I looked up on his wall, and I saw this picture of just a headshot of someone, and I thought, it looks like a monk of sorts. So I walked over to the picture, and I looked and see the eyes in the picture, and I go, that's the one. That's my teacher. That's the one I have to see. And all of a sudden, the picture came alive, which sounds odd, but when I tell you, when it happens to you, it feels familiar, and like we're capable of this. What's housed in us is capable of far more than what we have been told to believe in ourselves. And the picture came alive, and she said to me, we're coming together again to complete something. And I thought, what could that be? I wonder what that is. And then she showed me a sort of a movie clip of when I was with her as a monk in a past life. I was one of her monks, but that somehow we got separated, and I couldn't complete my time with her in that lifetime. And so we were coming again to complete something. And so the healer walked into the room, and I said, is that a monk? And he goes, yeah. And I go, is she alive? And he goes, yeah. She's going to be in Boston in 2 weeks. You want to meet her? And I go, yeah, I want to meet her. And it's, it's the old saying, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And so I did meet her. And what was fascinating was that when she began to give a talk, and there were a number of hundreds of people who attended this event.
Mary, what year was that?
That was 1986.
Okay, thank you.
That I met her in Boston. And she started to give a talk about the ego, which was the same talk that Jesus gave me about the ego. And I went, wow, it's the same exact message about the ego, that the ego is just a case of mistaken identity. that we're just truly divine beings housed in this physical body, and that we're here to wake up from being entranced in an egoic way, that we're just separate beings and we just have human bodies and that's all we are. There's nothing else. And my whole life then embarked on, being with this teacher for quite a while, visiting with this teacher for quite a while. And that's when I understood that the energy that was awakened in me was the Kundalini energy. It was then that I went to visit this teacher at a meditation center and received another initiation in a more deeper way. That was in 1988 that happened. And I experienced self-realization, something that people think isn't possible. But not only is it possible, that's why we came here, to remember. We came to this earth to be self-realized. By self, I mean realized as divinity itself housed in a body. And when I experienced self-realization, the energy arose again, the Kundalini energy, but this time it didn't stop. It went all the way up to the top. And in that moment, my whole being just illumined in this light. And I went, oh my God, this is what's inside of a human being. This is unbelievable. And I heard the words, I am that I am. And then I heard the words, Aham Brahmasmi, which means I am Brahman. In other words, I am the divine. And all of this is my creation. And just as I had that experience, I saw a vision of Jesus rising in a cloud. And I'm thinking, oh my God, these visions really do happen. They're real. And I saw him rising in a cloud with his hands up, looking at me, and he rose all the way up. And I went, am I rising too? Is this the ascension we're supposed to make inwardly? Not outwardly, inwardly. And I knew that was true. And then my life unfolded. I also did see packets of light everywhere, again, over everything, and had that same experience of divinity in everything and in everyone. And I saw people walking by who were at the meditation center, and I could see that over their heads there was this round orb of light over their heads, and then the light seemed to twinkle down like a Christmas tree over them. And I thought, look, that's your divinity. Look, can't you see it? And but I knew that they couldn't. They were caught in their mind thoughts. I could see that they had mind thoughts, and they were caught in their mind thoughts of separation from what was their true state. And to say the least, I was changed forever. I could no longer look at myself the same way, other people the same way, our reason for being here the same way, our real reason for being here the same way. And I experienced the amazing divinity that lives in every single person. And it's important that we wake up, because if not, then the separative ego has the way. And the separative ego lives here down. And the separative ego will do the most horrific, terrible things to humanity and to each other. And once you think you're separate and the other person is not of any value, you can do anything. And that's why it's important to wake up. Because below here in our consciousness rests pride, envy, avarice, hate. And the first thing that happens when you're separated from your divinity. I did have to go back. When I experienced the self-realization, I could no longer maintain the state, because it takes tremendous power to maintain that state without the mind kicking in and then kind of bringing you down, because that's what happened to me. But I never forgot the real truth of it all. So from here down, we live in this separative state of a story. So for me, it was the story of Mary, here down. But when I experienced self-realization, the chakras rolled up, all the energy of it, like a scroll, and it went here, and then was given divine permission to go further, the Kundalini. And when it went here, that's when the chakra opened up, and I became one with the entire cosmos, as the cosmos. And I knew that was the truth housed in humanity and housed in every person. And that's why every person is very important. That's why every person, it's important to wake up and reclaim your own divine power, your own divine nature. And then I had to learn to live, in that truth. And that took time. It took time to integrate all of it. And I went on to, study to meditate and read spiritual books like the Bhagavad Gita, which talks about your divine energy within and how to reclaim it and how to live in this world to reclaim it. And so I went through a lot of different things after that, a lot of karmic cleansing with relationships, and but always holding to the truth. It's like, look, I just have to live through this. I have to live my truth as much as I can, treat people with respect, treat myself with respect. That takes a long time to integrate all of that, because the world is telling you something else, and you're trying to live, with this with your integrity. But the world is telling you, it keeps pulling you this way. Hate this person, hate that person, blame this, blame that. And it's never to reclaim your inner power, your inner strength, and to live your inner divinity that lives in everybody.
One of the things that strikes me, even in like my cursory studies, so I'm just the little bit I know about world religions, just to talk major world religions, is they seem to unite on this front, at least in their best iterations, that the point of all of this, I mean, think about, even just think of the Christian story. What is the point of Christ coming to earth? It is to reconnect us to our divinity. The church fathers would say, that God has come, that Jesus Christ has become man so that man can become God, or like God at least. So there's at least at their root, there's this place of like, okay, there's a disconnection, and this is how we reconnect. But the religion, I don't care which religion it is, always seems to get in the way of this. Like it's almost like the obstacles get re-erected. Does that make sense? To keep us separate, right?
When you use the word God, it's always an object subject.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right.
And it's always this, so God isn't a person. It's your divine energy, and it lives in you as you. So and when you become, it's hard to describe it, when you become totally one with that, you are one with everything, and you're no longer living in a object-subject relationship with the world, with other people, or with yourself.
Right.
And now and there, and you're in this gigantic flow. I mean, it's all around us. It's everywhere. Love is everywhere.
Yeah. Well, it reminds me of something that Peter Rollins several years ago wrote a book called The Idolatry of God. And in that he posits something similar, that when we objectify God, that's the idolatry. Idolatry isn't necessarily building a statue of God or of a God. And no, idolatry is objectifying God, making him concrete in some sense, and then essentially othering God so that we can then turn around and other others. That's a lot of others in one sentence, but
yes.
But he would say, and again, in the tradition of the philosophers and those who came before him, he would say, God does not exist. God is existence. He is the ground of all being. When we deny that somehow, either real or again, or imagined, when we begin to envision God as a separate thing that somehow we have to attain.
Yeah.
That's where all that stuff comes in. That's where all that striving comes in. That's where all of the, and then you get into the places of, well, you're right about God and I'm right about, and I'm right and you're wrong. I'm in, you're out. But what about this sense of interconnectedness? Because that's why I've left Christianity and as a religion. I'm like you. I haven't left Jesus. I still find Jesus fascinating, but only insofar as it helps us reconnect to not just to the divine, but to one another, and recognizing that we need each other and that we're interconnected and that we're all in that same flow. Does that make sense? Am I jiving with what you're talking about?
Yeah. Well, we're already interconnected. We just forgot.
Yeah, exactly.
We're already interconnected. I mean, and my take on Jesus, this is my take on Jesus. I can't prove it, but in my take and experience of him is that he was a great yogi, that he is a great yogi, and that those missing years were spent in India receiving his initiation, his high initiation into his divine nature, which is what happened to me, and that his great role was to be what's known as a Shaktipat teacher, someone who can has the a power, the authority. He wasn't the only one to help people awaken just by his presence, because he was awakened. And when you get around someone who's awakened, you have an experience of your own divinity, because the same thing is in you and you wake up to it. There's no difference. In other words, there's no difference between Jesus, me, and anybody else. And this is what he was trying to say. It's just that he awakened so fully that he could hold it and never be separated again from it. And this is possible within humanity. Not only is it possible within humanity, but it's the reason we came to this planet. This is a planet of love, but we've made it into something else. We've made it into a horror show. And, the only way to turn is inside, because that's where everything is. If your mind is constantly out in the world trying to find something, you'll never find anything except being disappointed and led down a road. But if you turn it inside, then you're curious about who you truly are. This is an old story, and many, many people now are going through this awakening inside themselves, realizing that, wait a minute, everything I've been taught is about, being a sinner and being separate, and that there's a separation, object-subject, is not correct, because it robs you of your true divinity. And once you experience the greatness within humanity, within yourself, we're already connected. We're all connected, and everything that we do has an impact on everything we do. Whether it's the person you meet at the grocery store and you open the door for them, it's all connected. It's all connected still, but just we forgot our inner connection. It's the inner connection. And when you connect inward, you become the cosmos, because we are the cosmos. We are that. We're eternal beings. You can't die. I also experienced my own death. I had an experience of my own death as well. You can't die. The physical body will drop, but the physical body has no life of its own, except with this consciousness that runs through it. And when I experienced self-realization at that time, I could see that this light, I looked down at my arm and I could see this light all around my flesh. And the flesh was not alive. It was the light that gave it life and made it move. Because when you die, you essentially just your breath, you leave through the breath, your consciousness leaves, and the body drops. Nobody wants to be around a dropped body. But they still feel somehow you're still alive. And you are, because we are eternal beings. You can't die. And once you remove the fear of death, I think it's more a fear of how am I going to die, than death itself. I don't want to suffer. But,
fair enough.
But we are eternal beings. You can't die. It's impossible, because your eternity is your divine nature, and it's omniscient, and it's not egoic. There's no object-subject. It just is. Yes, I would love to have that experience, complete union again while I still have a body, and to experience it and be able to hold it. But the mind in that separation is so strong. It's like this pulls you back down. But I think in that moment when it's your time to have that, then you will. And I do believe that that's why we are here. I believe that's why we're here, to anchor this in our beings, and to create a world that reflects that, to create structures that reflect that inner truth that lives in everyone. And right now, as we can see, we're sort of at a time, in humanity where we're at a big, big crossroads. And it's like, what are you going to choose? What are you going to, what's your choice here?
It seems we're going the other way, doesn't it?
And not to be pulled by the world, to try not to be pulled by that world in all the chaos that's happening, because when there's a great awakening, there's tremendous chaos created, and the old of object subject wants to pull you back, wants to pull you down. But that's why you have to, stay away from a lot of that and stay focused, like in nature, because nature is one, nature is consciousness, and to stay, with flowers and build things and be creative and do positive stuff, think positive ways, turn off the TV. Don't listen to them. That's not the truth. Hatred is never stronger than love and divinity itself. Just tune off all of that. That is just a lot of bluster as people are awakening and reclaiming themselves. It's quite the task that humanity has to do this in themselves. And it's one person at a time, because you say one person, what can one person do? I want to tell you, if you awaken to your divinity, wow, what a gift to humanity. Because that helps because you are one with everything. So it helps to awaken this consciousness. It does have an impact on it. It's not a small thing. It's the biggest gift you could ever give to humanity. It's a tremendous gift that you give to yourself. And then it's quite extraordinary. When it happens, you remember who you are. And you're like, oh my God, I forgot. I forgot who I was. And now I know the truth that rests in everybody and everything in every way, all the time, 24/7, will never die. It's eternal. And here we are, having these conversations, which is my favorite conversation, by the way.
As soon as when you said that, it reminded me of one of my favorite scenes in a movie is the movie Hook with Robin Williams, where it's Peter Pan, and he's come back to himself. It's towards the end of the movie, and he suddenly sees all the people that he's been living as a grown up, as an adult, for this whole, and he has this awakening. And I go back to movies a lot. It also reminds me of the scene in Lord of the Rings when the king, who's been blinded and deceived, and suddenly he's away. So that's what I feel like metaphorically, like a lot of us are looking for. And I think a lot of us rightfully go looking for it in the place we think we should find it, which is our faith, right? And I think a source of great disappointment for a lot of us. And I think if you drill down, I don't think people know how to put a name to it, which is why I think why I think what you're talking about is so important, is because it helps identify for us what this sense is that we've been feeling. There's an awful lot of disappointment. There's a lot of disconnectedness. And I think for a lot of us, we have a hard time articulating what that is. And then as you're speaking, I'm like, that's what it is. That's my profound disappointment, is that in the one place I think I should have found instruction on how to better anchor myself in the divine, and how to better be connected and stay connected to my fellow human beings, and how to care for and better care for the planet I inhabit. Instead, we got a religion that told us to dominate the earth, not care for it. We got a religion that told us, well, don't worry about them. We're on the in, they're on the out. They'll our job is to evangelize them, but not necessarily care for them. And instead of all of that, we got an even more insular experience of a very tribal kind of thing. Like, hey, we're all going to gather inside of our four walls here. So yeah, I don't have a question in that. I'm having my own internal monologue as you're talking, going, okay, that's putting some things into perspective for me and helping me to name those things that for me are, and when I say profound, I mean profoundly disappointing. It causes an awful lot of distrust. It feels like a betrayal.
It is a betrayal.
If I'm being really honest, that, and I feel like if there's anything to be regained in those spheres, it's going to have to be something more mystical than what we've been sold. I do really enjoy people like Father Richard Rohr, who are trying very hard to reclaim and for the Catholic Church, there's a very, very interesting and I think very useful mystic stream that runs through some parts of Catholicism. And sadly, the louder voices have not been those. the louder voices have been those of separation and those of tribalism. But I don't know. Again, no question there. I'm just reacting to what you're saying. I think it's beautiful. I know Bethany asks questions because she's always very astute and also loquacious, as we mentioned previously.
I do have questions, but if you wanted to respond to any of that, Mary, you're welcome to do so.
Well, I think the problem is that there are partial truths that are delivered, which is confusing.
For sure.
That gets confusing. Well, that's true, but wait a minute, that's not true.
Yeah.
So it's all this confusion, So the partial truths get delivered, which isn't the truth, of course, because it's watered down. But yeah, go ahead, Bethany. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say how much your writing and what you were speaking about today resonates with me. But honestly, it makes me slightly uncomfortable because it's unfamiliar to me in some ways. And I think that the discomfort is something that a lot of people probably experience when they encounter you, because you are pulling things out of people that are oftentimes hidden, or they don't even recognize it in themselves. And you get to gently reveal something and uncover something that people may not have experienced in themselves. And I'm curious, I think surrendering just gives us this ability to not fear anything. We have nothing to fear within any of this. It's just all goodness in life. But I'm curious, like who you are, the experiences that you've had, the encounters you've had with recognizing your own divinity and what God is, however you want to say God, the ground of our being, how that is impacting your life. Like, I'm curious how it's impacted your family's lives and your friendships. You said that you have a daughter. How has that impacted her and your relationship? I'm just curious about that.
It's, my family also espouses to divinity in themselves and in everyone. So that makes it easy, that makes it easy for me. And especially one of my grandsons, who's my youngest grandson, who's now 25, believe it or not, is very spiritual. And so I dedicated my book to him. I don't know if you read the dedication, but when he was 3 months old, he came to me in a dream and he said, God is consciousness. I am consciousness. Everything is consciousness. The people need to know. I'm glad you're here with me, Mary. I love the name Mary. And so I dedicated my book to him. And he is going through his own beautiful awakening. And, you just watch and just love. Just watch and love people. So I'm very fortunate that my family is open to their own divinity in themselves. It's not just me, it's everybody. So does that answer your question?
It does. Yeah. And I think I just love that it just exudes out of you and has continued forth throughout the generations. That it's just this really beautiful thing. I'm curious also, when you first experienced that moment when Jesus entered into the room or whatever it was that happened there, I'm curious about, at that point you said that you had lost everything, that you were ready to not be alive anymore. And had those additional experiences happen when you were at the bottom of yourself, when the comforts of the world are no longer with you and those sorts of experiences happen, or is it just random?
It was just that one time that I have felt that way. Because after that, once I experienced the truth within, then it becomes a journey of an adventure, a divine adventure. And now I knew the truth. And even though I said, please God, just let me die, I can't take it anymore, I would never have committed suicide because that wasn't part of my story. Although it is part of other people's stories. But it was more of a, help me, help, I need help. And so I've only experienced that kind of rock bottom once. And it just changed me forever. It isn't that I haven't had disappointments in my life through that time. Yes. But because of all of this, I've been able to ride those disappointments and sort of see them for what they are. And we just have to have a lot of experiences for whatever reason. Some people call it karma, cleansing karma. who knows the real truth behind that, but I'm sure there is some truth to that. But but the truth remains that we are divine beings. And if you hold on to your own divinity inside, especially when you have those experiences, that really does provide a foundation for you to ride through the roller coaster of life. I mean, it's a roller coaster of life. It is a roller coaster too. It goes up and down, and if you can hang on, you won't come off the rails, and if you do, just get back on, but, so I had, I also had he did talk to me about disease. Jesus originally talked to me about disease and said that all disease begins in consciousness. And it wasn't until 14 years later when I had my whole own health crisis with my thyroid failing that originally I took one of the drugs that they give you for that, but it made me so sick that I had to find another way. So who do you ask? Who do you go to when you need to find another way? You ask the universe, because the universe is you. And you say, okay, I need someone who can not only teach me about the emotional reasons for this, but I want to be healed. I can't take drugs. I don't want drugs. The very next day, I was at work and I mentioned this to my colleague, and she turned around handing me a flyer and she said, well, then you're going to need homeopathic medicine. And I'm like, what's homeopathic medicine? And so I saw that there was a registered nurse who lived nearby who was a homeopath. So I called her up, made an appointment. And when I first took the remedy, we did it. It was a very unusual kind of intake. It was like a 2-hour intake. She asked me a lot of questions. I told her my story. One of the most amazing, and she had me do a timeline of my life from in utero up until that time, of any never well since events in my life and what happened, how I did respond to them. And it really told us a tale of a lot of grief over relationships. And when I asked my mother in utero, did anything happen when she was pregnant with me? She said, oh, yes, when I was 8 months pregnant with you, my mother died, who was my very, very, very best friend. And I couldn't function afterwards because I was in so much grief. So that was layered on top of me, this grief about relationships and nurturing. And, all of my life, that showed up until I met homeopathy, because homeopathic medicine is the mind-body medicine that could dig into that grief and release it. And when I took the first dose of a remedy, well-chosen remedy with it, I remember I was standing at the kitchen sink. I put a dose, it was in water, in my mouth. And as soon as I did that, my whole being just left my body. And I went out into the universe and I saw this little twinkling star. And I thought, oh, that's where my energy grief is stuck. Then I saw another twinkling star that was the remedy. And they matched each other. And when they came together, it exploded. I went back into my body and I went, oh my God, that's how it works. Like cures like. Find the remedy from nature, highly diluted, which can interact as a catalyst to release whatever mental, emotional traumas and issues you have. And the inner law, which is inside us and in all of nature, because nature and us are one, is like cures like. And so that began my journey. And I said to her, oh my God, I have to study this. And she said, well, lucky for you, Dr. Luke DeShepper is going to be here in September, and he's going to be here for 3 years in Boston. Do you want to study with him? And I go, yes. Again, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And so I went on to study with Dr. Luke, me and about 88 of my classmates for over 3 years, and then advanced classes. And Dr. Luke just passed away. God bless Dr. Luke, but he taught me everything, helped me understand everything, showed me how to interact with people when you're taking a case. So, that's how I learned homeopathic medicine, which is over 20 years ago. And so I've successfully used that. Of course, it cured my thyroid problems, my eczema problems, my bronchitis. It cured all of that. But it took time. It took time because I needed this for a very long time. So this system of medicine was once part of our medicine in the United States, but Rockefeller removed it so he could just promote his synthetic petrochemical drugs. So he removed that, even though there's a monument, the only monument to a medical doctor sits in Washington, D.C., Dr. Samuel Hahnemann, the father of homeopathy. And it sits in Scott Circle. He's the only MD who has a monument there. It was dedicated by President McKinley as the great medical reformer of the 19th century. And that was in 1900. And then it was in 1910 that Rockefeller got serious and had the system removed because it was working too well for all prevention of all communicable disease. But by the way, I teach classes on that. I have a class that people can access online at their own pace to teach about homeopathic medicine, what to do for flus and colds and all kinds of ailments and tick bites and all this sort of stuff. So people can, it's an online class that they can self-paced class. They can study themselves. So I do that. And of course, I wrote my new book, Out of the Blue, which is on Amazon. And all of this you can get from my website, maryterhune.com, for people who are interested in that. So help is on the way. Homeopathic medicine we're really trying to make a comeback in the United States. Of course, it's popular all over the entire world. But it's very important to do this because our health and our spirituality, are very connected in the sense that you want to release all of this so that you can have that inner experience, so that you're not just constantly stuck in trauma, mental, emotional traumas. So, I mean, this is how much is available to us. It's all here. We just have to be open to it. That's all. We just have to be open to it. And be interested in ourselves, interested in what's going on inside me anyway. If she experienced it and she doesn't look too special, then maybe I can experience it, She looks pretty ordinary. And she's from New Jersey, so if anybody, I can. So that's
nothing wrong with that. Well, it's interesting because my wife actually worked for a homeopathic doctor for about 3 or 4 years.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, and just a fascinating guy. And had an approach that was sort of a marriage of Western medicine and homeopathy. So, which I thought was a novel approach. Like not one to completely eschew medical science completely, but his whole thing was that his big frustration was that people only typically came to see him when their illnesses had progressed to the point where they were out of options. And then he would say, well, I'll do what I can. But so it was frustrating to find people with cancers that were so far progressed that he's like, man, if you'd come to me a year ago, I think there's things we could have done for you. It should be homeopathy first. Yeah. And then, we need both. We have to have allopathy and homeopathy to have a balanced system. One is for any needed surgeries or for some reason you have to have drugs for a while. But homeopathy is there to really, if in acute events, if you can use homeopathy, that can prevent you from going into chronic problems. So it's having the wisdom to know when to use what. And we used to have medical doctors in the United States, at least 15,000 of them were both medical doctors and homeopaths. Surgeons who are also homeopaths. So once upon a time, it's not that you're discarding one or the other. It's that you're opening up the field of understanding of science beyond the material level, getting into the level of consciousness. The consciousness is a living force that needs to be reckoned with and can help. It created everything. So to cut it off and just only deal with the material world is just folly. And you can see the mess that the world is in. The health of people is down the tubes, and we're going in the wrong direction that way. But people are trying to open up the field so that Max Texmark from MIT is saying that maybe consciousness is the fourth state of matter. So he's trying. Of course, he's been belittled for that, but consciousness is a whole field that's been ignored because we're just stuck in that old material model that is suppressive. It's not curative, but it's good to keep you alive, but it's not enough. We need to have a balanced system.
And we know that trauma can cause illness.
Of course. So people die of broken hearts.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's something that modern medicine doesn't look at all.
No.
but homeopathy does.
No, we've cut ourselves off.
I think, yeah, and honestly, sometimes you're one of a handful of people that I've talked to, and I bet Bethany and John would say the same, that I grasp for a foothold in what you're saying. I don't have a grasp of it. Does that make sense? So I'm like, okay,
it's in you. It's in you. It's in
so
you.
I gotta go, but I gotta go inward. I gotta go. But I do think what you're saying, if I can offer this, I would say that the resonance that I think myself and Bethany in particular feel with this, and probably John agrees, although I deign to try and speak for him, is that it's touching on that sort of foundational place of discontentment with all of us. It's the reason we, for lack of a better term, have deconstructed our faith in many ways, because where we found ourselves is like, okay, well, whatever this is, it isn't working. Like, this is very programmatic. This is very performative. And I did that until I couldn't do that anymore. Until, like the little hamster on the wheel, I got tired of spinning my legs and not going anywhere. And again, performing for the accolades of people who really couldn't give a shit about me one way or the other. All the while, you're doing all this stuff and you're ignoring all of your internal needs, your own well-being. And I've seen this in the church. I've seen this with my friends who are striving for success in other ways, to the detriment of their relationships, to the detriment of their own mental and spiritual well-being. So I think this is a book that if people will read it, and you're just going to have to take some time to digest it. And I think there's going to have to be some willingness to be like, okay, let me look beyond the normal language of religion and faith and God, and be willing to discard that for a moment and just say, okay, well, whatever is here. I like your prayer. And I know it came from a place of desperation, but I think that's where most of our honest prayers come from. Because once you run out of rope, you also usually run out of words.
Yeah.
And the most eloquent among us can just say, "Gah!" It's like, well, the Bible talks about it, right? It says that when we run out of words, we have our groanings. And I've been there. I've had those moments, but
of course.
That is a place where, sadly, I think maybe by design or just by happenstance, maybe up to that point, we're not open to something that would challenge our paradigm really, really, really robustly. And we have to be at a place where we're like, okay, I've done this. None of this is working. Okay, what else could there be? And it turns out a whole heck of a lot.
A whole heck of a lot.
Everything is a thing that, for some reason or other, our attention they've been trying to divert our attention from it. And
yes, the whole world diverts your attention from it. Yeah,
it's just one big little shiny thing that they're saying, no, over here.
Yes.
And meanwhile, they're distracting you from the important work. So yeah.
Well, even the word repentance in Scripture, a lot of times people think it's like to change the direction you're going, but it really means to wake up to what has always existed.
Yeah.
It's like a sense of, this has always been the way it is. And now that you see it, you live differently because you are now awake to it. And it made me think of a lot of the mystical, maybe not even mystical, but spiritual craziness that happens sometimes in the church happens in like the Pentecostal or charismatic churches. But even then it feels like, and I'm not Pentecostal or charismatic, so I'm speaking from an outsider looking in. But even then it seems like it's an outward manifestation where people are like, they say things like, we just want God to show up. If God could just show up, we're going to let's just create space for God to show up. And it's just like, man, maybe we need just to ask ourselves, let's wake up. Let us experience what has always existed from the beginning of it and into eternity, that we get to then just participate in, instead of trying to drum up a spiritual experience.
It's an inner job, let me tell you, and it is extraordinary. When it happens to you, it is extraordinary, but yet it feels familiar. You're like, I forgot. How could I have forgotten that? But it's extraordinary what lives in each person. Extraordinary. Can I just share quickly what the message that I was given when I had experienced self-realization?
Of course.
What I heard. I wouldn't say message I was given. I guess just I opened to these words, and it said, "Here is your divinity, the divinity that awaits all mankind. Your soul wants full expression now. This is the presence. This is the living presence. This is living. This is real.
That is as good a place as any to stop. I think it's been a profound experience, Mary. Thank you so much.
To stop and start.
To stop and start. That's awesome. Yeah, you're very right. The name of the book again is Out of the Blue, correct?
Yes.
And is available
on Amazon, yeah.
On Amazon and wherever fine books are sold, I'm sure. Man, we wish you nothing but the best with this. I hope you have lots of success with it.
Thanks so much.
I'm at a loss for words. I appreciate everything. I appreciate taking the time to hang out with us and
sure.
and talk to us.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to This Is Not Church. Be sure to rate and review the podcast on your platform of choice. If you would like to partner with us, visit patreon.com/thisisnotchurch, where you will receive exclusive content such as early access to episodes, videos of upcoming episodes, and live Q&A sessions. Be sure to check out our Facebook group or follow us on Twitter and Instagram. All the links are in the show notes. We'll be back soon with another episode.